institutes in the entire world, UF Scripps and Max Planck Institute. Now, in the heart of this extraordinary biotech hub, our students enjoyed unmatched access to cutting-edge research that focuses on issues like neurodegenerative disease and cancer. But while we can marvel at the expansion that this college has seen over the past 26 years, the original spirit remains constant. We offer 32 different majors, embracing a holistic, well-rounded approach to education that's grounded in both the liberal arts and the sciences. And so no matter what your interests are, there's a place for students to dream here at the Wilkes Honors College, where students have over 50 different clubs and organizations to participate in. Each year, we average about 170 internships in the community. Our students volunteer and work at hospitals, pharmacies, dentistries, law firms, museums, zoos, schools, parks, financial companies, and many other businesses, contributing to the local economy each and every day. We not only believe in the value of hands-on learning, but also learning in another country as well. And so that's why each year students engage in life-changing experiences studying abroad in Spain, Italy, Guatemala, Australia, Ireland, Japan, South Korea, the Galapagos Islands, France, just to name a few countries. And did you also know that approximately 60% of our alumni enter graduate school or get a professional degree after graduating? Many choose to stay and work right here in South Florida, and most of our students graduate debt-free, zero debt, thanks to the generosity of our donors. Now, I could go on all day and night about this extraordinary place, but I think you get the picture of what I'm saying. And so if you're interested in learning more about Wilkes, please let me know. Stick around. I'd love to chat with you. I'd be happy to meet with you and provide you a personalized tour of our amazing college. And so without further ado, it's time for me to introduce one of our many talented, bright students, Brycelyn Turner, who will introduce today's very special guest.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It is my privilege to be able to introduce Alexander Chee to you all tonight. Alexander Chee is the best-selling author of the novels Edinburgh and The Queen of the Night, as well as the essay collection How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. He's been the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including a Whiting Award, a United States Artist Fellowship, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and many others. He's a full professor of English and creative writing at Dartmouth College. In my time studying writing at the Honors College, Alexander Chee's work has been among the most formative and influential to my voice as a young writer. It is an honor to be here tonight, learning more from an author I already feel has already taught me so much on the page. From Chee's work, I have learned how to tear apart a draft of my own essay, to change my verbs and cut away my words, until only my best sentences remain, and then begin again from there. He has also taught me that we can never have queer joy without queer resistance, in the same way that you cannot be a writer if you choose to stop writing. Perhaps the most important lesson I have learned from Alexander Chee is the weight that my voice carries as I leave this campus to pursue a writing life of my own. Chee writes in his essay on becoming an American writer, "Should you decide that writing is your way to serve your country or to defend it, you are almost always writing about the country it could become." At a time when literature is being censored and diminished across America, authors like Alexander Chee, who are not only aware of the undeniable power of writing, but wield it to defend the country that America promises itself to be, have never been more important. I only hope that I will be able to follow in his footsteps, our stories next to each other on the shelf that leads readers to fight for the nation that we could become. Tonight, Alexander Chee will be reading an excerpt from a work in progress, followed by a conversation with Professor Rachel Luria, and finally a Q&A with the audience. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alexander Chee.
Thank you so much, Brycelyn. That was really moving. It feels almost shameful that I'm going to read from this kind of trashy comic novel in progress. But part of why I was wanting to read from it is that so back in the mid-1990s, my mother moved to Jupiter, Florida, and lived here for about 5 years before she found herself a new husband in the form of my stepfather, and they moved back to Maine because it turned out they were both from Maine. And I sometimes joke that they met down here because they were the only ones who could understand each other. They both have Maine accents. But she did enjoy herself here, and I did enjoy coming down to see her, and I didn't realize when I accepted this invitation that Jupiter was so close by, but this narrator in my new novel, which is called Other People's Husbands, is from Jupiter, Florida. So I thought, and there's a short mention of Jupiter in this excerpt. So we'll see. Suddenly it seems absolutely appalling that I'm doing this, but anyway. It seemed like a good idea on the way down. Okay. This is, to set it up just a little bit, it's early in the novel, and the main character, was there? Yes. The main character, a 40-something Korean American writer, mixed race, by the name of Roger Lee, who has been hired as a visiting writer to teach at his alma mater, which is an invented college named Sheffield, which is located in the Berkshires and is not at all inspired by Amherst College, where I used to teach, but where I was not. It was not my alma mater, and he has moved there after breaking up with his boyfriend in New York, and he's decided he's never going to have another boyfriend again. He just wants to have sex with strangers, and no more love. And then, well, we'll see what happens. On a late summer night in 2007, I walked into the Sheffield College faculty locker room and noticed a man standing naked in the distance against the far wall in the last row of lockers by the showers. He was tall and handsome from the back, halfway between his youth and his middle age. He pulled on his shorts quickly at the sound of my footsteps, as if by instinct he felt he could only be safely naked alone. The gesture was so youthful, I wondered briefly if a student had somehow made their way in here. I was just nearsighted enough to need glasses to drive at night, and I did not have them on. Without them, the road signs become slightly blurred and rounded versions of themselves, the silhouettes of their meanings, like him at this moment. I was used to being alone here, and at times preferred it, but also when faculty sign up to use the gym, we receive locker assignments, and I remember thinking it was very thoughtful of the gym's administrator to put me right by the showers. My friend Benjamin in the English department had joked about not ever wanting to be the male professor who stood naked by the entrance to the showers, and I said, well, I'm just a visitor, let it be me. And as if they heard me, they did. That spot let me see who was in the showers, who was entering and exiting, who might be lingering. I would never be eligible for tenure here as a visiting writer, so it was in many ways a better game for me. I could glimpse the tenure package, as it were. I thrilled to see the tenured faculty penis every time, no matter whose it was. The colleague's penis, after all, was a taboo on its own, and so I wondered if the new guy liked it too, even as I wanted, of course, to see his penis. As I approached, I felt along my skin a sort of pressure develop around me, as if I were walking against a wind, the wind of my own appetite, no doubt. I checked off the list of men I had seen here. He was not the lion of the English department, a spiky-haired and senior colleague who had left comments on his papers that I had to explain to students. What does Yesu mean, Professor Lee? And who engaged in a very funny eyes up here, locked gaze with me whenever we ran into each other nude, each of us seeming to dare the other to look down. He had a fantastic fat pink cock, entrancing, which I knew, having practiced yogic seeing, which allowed me to sort of look around someone without looking down. The stranger was also not the new professor in Arab studies, who was balder than this man, and who I knew was gay and partnered, and who winked at me when he saw me every time in the locker room or on campus. He carried a towel very strategically, as if maybe in his past he had been a go-go dancer. He was not the shaggy blonde librarian husband of a comp-lit colleague who told me he enjoyed showing off his distractingly long penis just before he did so the first time we'd met up here, and I had not blown him yet, had not even offered, just to spite him for that. He definitely expected it, along with the look he got from me when his package hit the air. I knew I would do this for him. He knew I would also, but I was still going to make him wait. He was also not any of the straight colleagues who I admired all the same, but who came so much less often that I never really knew them, just dicks in the wind. I arrived at my locker across the same aisle. My new friend put his glasses on, and then I recognized him. Jerry, I remembered his name was, whose tortoise-rimmed glasses had changed his face entirely, the Clark Kent disguise. He was a political science postdoc. We had met at a new faculty reception the year previous, and I hadn't seen him since. Academic life is like this. It's nice to see you again, he said. I was happy he remembered me, but also I wondered suddenly what he meant. He didn't have to be that enthusiastic, or was there something I didn't know? Even as I wondered that, an unexpected and quick erotic charge passed between us. That specific tension you feel before sex. It's nice to see you too, Jerry, I said, referring basically to that feeling. We met at the new faculty lunch last year, right? I'm Roger, I offered, as if he might need the reminder. I remember. He reached out to shake hands. His were warm and faintly damp. He was seated in his underwear, and as I took off my shirt and brought my hands to the jeans button at my waist, it felt almost as if we were undressing for each other. He was deeply tanned from tennis, with the pale shoulders and stomach you can get if you don't play shirtless. I'd wondered about his body, and here it was, a hairy chest, broad shoulders, a patch of hair between them that he hadn't bothered to shave, as I saw when he stood and turned his back to me. I like to call it a wolf patch. Gay men didn't usually leave it untrimmed back in those days. His white briefs glowed, as did his tan line across the backs of his thighs. He had the sculptural buttocks of the Neptune statues I always linger around whenever I find them in different European countries. I resisted the urge to reach out, put my finger into his waistband, and pull it down. Are you changing to work out or changing to leave? I asked. He rubbed the hair on his head as if it were a difficult question. Or do you just like the locker room? This place is a palace, honestly, he said. I love it here. And we both laughed. He still hadn't answered, though. I undid my pants finally and changed into my swimsuit, and he turned back to me just as I did so. We were like two people in a strange porno movie suddenly, from the 1970s, back when the locker room was built. And by locker room, I mean haunted cave of sexual desire, of course. Neither of us had expected to see each other there, and neither of us seemed ready to leave either. The subtext was something like, now we have seen each other naked, and the glory hidden all this time by these clothes, these sad disguises, who you and I were, who we pretended to be, who we will be, who we are now. I want to know it all, and you want it too. What are the rules about having sex with other people in the faculty, I wondered. No one ever brought that up back in 2007, almost as if it were out of the question. Were there any? There had to be. Well, have fun, I probably said, as the memory of what I said gets a little unclear here, the tape in my mind going white, and I typically do use that as a declarative goodbye when I or someone else can barely speak and we need to part ways. My eyes had been seeking out the different corners of the shower room and the lockers, wondering casually if there were somewhere we could hook up even briefly. He lifted his eyes to meet mine when I said that with the smile of someone who'd been caught. I will, he said, our eyes meeting, this being one of the short declarative affirmatives all men use to exit in response. But his eyes seemed to say, stay. I closed my locker door, snapped the lock shut, and as I left for the pool, he stood to continue getting dressed. It wasn't until I was near the door that it occurred to me he might have been hiding the start of an erection, much like I was, my towel by my crotch as I pushed the pool door open. I found it blissfully empty of even a lifeguard, a vast pool of water, lit, open, all for them, but in this moment, just for me. I leapt in, grimacing as I hit the cold water. All right then, I told myself as the water closed over my head and my erection faded. Awkward flirting with a colleague, let it go. No one wants a Title IX complaint of uncertain dimensions while being a visitor. But I am a contrarian, and when people tell me what to do, even when it is me, perhaps especially then, I go the other way. And so I did not let it go. I swam a few laps and then thought, go back into the locker room right now, and if he's there, it's meant to be. I got out and went back. As I looked around the now empty locker room and shower, I knew he'd left. This meant it was not meant to be, I told myself, even as I reset the test, like rereading my tarot cards when I didn't like the reading. We met at the new faculty lunch the year previous, when Jerry and I ended up seated next to each other around a long table in the faculty club dining room, 2 of 50 present that day for the arts and sciences. Introductions were underway. Most of us were making an effort to be funny and brief. I'm Roger Lee, I said. I'm an alum, class of 1990, returning as the visiting writer. This was interrupted by applause, and when it finished, I added, I'm a novelist at work on his second novel, and please don't ask me how it's going. The answer will ruin any party. It was always funny for some reason to act the part of the novelist who was failing at the task, and there was some laughter at this, and then all the attention went to my neighbor. I'm Jerry Frankenthaler, he said. I'm a postdoc in political science and government, and if you ask me what I work on, it might ruin the party too. And then he smiled at me as he said that last part. There was more laughter, and then the lunch moved on to whoever it was sitting on his other side, lost to me now. Jerry had struck me as cute and stylish before then, but now he was flirting with me, this big, handsome white man, handsome in a way that looked expensive, riffing off of my introductory remarks like we were a buddy act. His Roman nose, his deep-set blue eyes with such long lashes, his heavy dark brows, his dark brown hair receding into a widow's peak, as it was called, for reasons most people didn't remember. The strong lips, large and full, playful, but what I remember best is how we sat next to each other and we brushed our forearms together a few times, the small hairs there entangling ever so briefly, and each time the charge of that woke me right up. But I couldn't make sense of whether he was gay or not, and more importantly, would he have sex with me? As I puzzled over this, I understood this had not been a social problem for me since the last time I was at Sheffield as a student. And I like to think of myself as an expert on people's closets. This one is 3 years away from throwing that door open, I used to say. That one is 5 hours away, maybe 3, maybe just 3 beers. You think everyone is gay, my friends used to say to me. I don't, I would reply. I think the gay ones are gay. Friends from my life in New York would call some men a six-pack gay, as in Gay for a six-pack or after one, good for a blowjob, and maybe some long, desperate kisses. But it never really took a whole six-pack in my experience, maybe not even a beer, and being afraid of being gay wasn't the same as being straight. You may be thinking it was early for me to be having these thoughts, having just met him, but I liked how he would flush a little. When I tilted my head and leaned in to listen, I found this endearing. I had let my guard down. Over our sandwiches, I asked Jerry a few polite questions. We made small talk, but none of it comes back to me like what I felt each time the hairs on our forearms caught. If that was what it was like to touch his arms, I wanted to know what it would be like to touch the rest of him. The talk was mostly about where he was from, Philadelphia, why he was here to finish a doctoral thesis. I don't recall his specific subject or that he asked me any questions at first, and I didn't mind. I had just warned people not to ask me about the novel, and he obeyed. And sometimes it is a relief to just listen to someone else. You'd be surprised, too, how many men can be seduced just by listening to them. Maybe you already know. I was not immune. Jerry told me he'd been raised mostly overseas, following his parents around. His father was in the State Department, which often, but not always, means they are a spy of some kind. As the adult passes through various embassy assignments, the child gets the education the American schools there provide. He was briefly a teen in Manila and in Singapore, and then his parents sent him to Choate. And from there, he went to Williams. I decided he was international and not gay, the preppy but stylish nerdiness just a mismatch with American manners. I was alternately taking him in or out of the closet during this lunch. He mentioned then that Chief Justice Samuel Alito was coming to campus, and he was going to the dinner. He told me this with excitement and not dread. The chair is a friend and invites him just about every year, he said. I knew enough about academia to know that there were tenured faculty in his department who would not get that invitation. And so he didn't say he was a hot young star in his field, but I could tell he was someone's favorite, Alito's host most likely. Jerry glowed with what was surely the reflected shine of the admiration of others. The irony of him wanting to be like those whose esteem he sought was that I was sure they all wanted to be him. Or they imagined that they had been him, well-dressed, manicured, accomplished, stylish but awkward enough to put you at ease, an interdimensional framework of their desires. Maybe mine also. I withdrew my attention then, as I was sure I understood what was happening. He was a closeted man after all, I told myself, and a conservative too. This change in me threw him off, and he tried to draw me back in. He reached out to touch the top of my right hand next to him with one finger to get my attention. A too intimate gesture, and then he finally asked me questions about where I was from, what my parents did, the sort of questions I don't like to answer in this setting or maybe ever. They don't draw me out, that is to say. My father was in the Air Force, I said, retired for some time now. My mother is a waitress at a diner. I'm from Jupiter, Florida, approximately, home of the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater. But I'm a military brat. We moved around a lot too. He nodded. No one up here in the Berkshires was ever too curious about Jupiter. The Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater mention was always how I got them off the hook. I let them smile at the memory of the great Burt Reynolds and imagine what the place must have been like, even as their curiosity faded and they changed the topic. Your mom must be really proud of you, he said. We don't talk much, I said. But she might at least be glad I'm not a waiter like her. Not that my old jobs had much in common with hers. And she liked her diner life. She liked having regulars, knowing their coffee or tea orders, knowing the truckers, the cops, the phone line repair guys, the cable guys, the teachers, the local characters, the other waitresses, the mayor. She might have my job someday if I'm not too careful, the mayor used to joke with me as he passed the counter where I sat, watching her managing so many different tasks and people at the same time. I did my homework there so she could look after me after school and then we'd go home together. Her boss didn't mind that somehow. Everyone liked Yoon-Ji Lee. She wasn't like that at home, where the enormous effort of the day slid off her and revealed a mortal woman, anxious to watch her Korean shows sent to her by her sisters on VHS tapes in the mail from Busan, sisters I still had never met. Jerry said something, and I hadn't heard him, And then as I returned, he said, "You went somewhere." "It's okay," I said. "We don't have to talk about my mom." "So, not the novel, not your mom. What can we talk about?" "Let's talk about your mom. Is your mom proud of you?" He blinked a few times and laughed, startled. "I don't know if that's fair," he said. "You wouldn't answer the same question just now. And also, I don't know the answer to that question, actually." "Well, now you know how it feels." More mutual laughter, and then he seemed to go somewhere too. "Do you think the Republicans are going to impeach Bush before the Democrats do?" I asked, changing the topic. I told this joke to anyone back then, but mostly because I hoped it would happen. "What? Why?" "Immigration," I said. "Sorry to be freelancing into your territory. I know I'm just a novelist, barely, but he is pro-immigration. I just want your experienced opinion, and to make it interesting, I'll bet you $5. I held out my hand as if to shake on the deal. He looked down at it. "Come on," I said. "You're not taking that? They pay you that little?" He looked to be holding his breath, smiling uncomfortably. I had managed, it seemed, to make him want to leave. And as if on cue, desserts came, the plates full of the little cookies you could find all over campus after every event dropped down in front of us. I knew them well already: oatmeal raisin, chocolate chip, chocolate with white chocolate chips, brownie squares, blondie squares, no nuts, of course. A little coffee was offered. I took some, and then we said goodbye and went on our ways. The lunch was over. In the story I told for months after this, it was a story about a lunch flirtation that went wrong when my joke had thrown him off. A little flirtation I'd condescended to. He entered into my personal campus dramatis personae as the guy we weren't sure was gay. And as I met the other gays on campus, I would ask about if they knew him, and when they did not, I would tell them that story, and it did seem as if no one knew him, and thus did the story get around. And then a year passed, and I hadn't remembered it, but he did. When I got home after running into Jerry at the gym that night, forever single as I was now committed to be, I looked at my emails and found the one I'd sent to him just after lunch with the subject line $5 and a link to an article about how conservatives were threatening to drop the articles of impeachment if Bush didn't change his stance on immigration, the war on terror, and the Constitution. He hadn't ever replied to the email. It was a genuinely irritating email for me, I had to say. I let my finger hover over the cursor as if to write back again. I clicked it, then I clicked the new reply shut. I would have done the same if he'd written me about my novel. He just didn't want to talk to me about Bush and immigration or impeachment. Why had he said that it was good to see me again then? Was it just to talk? He could have made that happen. Could have written back, made a date. It was as if he missed me. That was exactly like something he would say casually in conversation. But he didn't have to say it. That he had suggested desire and hesitation both. The conversation in his head. He'd been talking to me in his head. I told myself to walk away, to let go, to stop even the thought of chasing after him. It was so pointless. There is so much more dick that actually wants to be held, I told myself. I knew as I'd even held some of it. But what about that one? I also told myself, arguing. What if it needs me? Anyway, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Is that what? A little loud. He did ask me if he could be, how salacious he could be, and I asked my mother, who's in the audience, and she said, go for it. So, yeah. And it was really barely salacious, so I enjoyed that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, thank you. All right, so this is from a new piece. It's working, okay.
Here we go. Ooh, here we go.
Okay.
I'll hold it out here.
Yeah, well, like, hold it out.
Yes.
So thank you for that reading. That was wonderful. And what sort of serendipity that it's set in Jupiter, and you're coming to Jupiter, and none of us knew that when we made these arrangements. So
I wouldn't say it's set in Jupiter
Well,
exactly, but Yes, there's a couple of references. There's like at least one strong scene. Maybe there will be more after this visit, because I am, of course, quickly doing research. In the days when I was more of a freelance writer, something I would do a lot is I would take an assignment and then use it to also research other writing. Or I would know that I needed to research other writing, and so I would pitch an assignment and hope to do it at the same time. So like one time I was writing about the Hyperloop, for example, way back, early days of Elon Musk, and I found that I could rent an apartment that I used to live in Los Angeles on Airbnb. And so I did it as like a way to, because I think memory is incredibly geographic. There's like things that you will not remember about a place until you're back there. And suddenly, like, as if it were all waiting in the ground, in the air, in the plants, it all just comes flying back at you. And so I was like, yep, there's that liquor store. There's that taqueria, there's that, like it all, it's the setting, but it's also like the prompt, a memory prompt, So that's like one way that you can do that. So this is, I suppose I could say, like the college visit version of that, even though I did not know when I agreed to do it that this would be the result.
Worked out. I think that's so true about memory being geographic. And also, do you find that, like, when you went back to that apartment, did it reveal to you the ways your memory can lie to you? Like, I remember the first time I went back to college and saw the dorm that I lived in, and I'm like, this place is so small. How did I remembered cathedral ceilings. And so, it's good to go back and revisit, because your memory can tell you a different story.
Yes, I think that's part of the fun. Fact checking yourself is something that I do try to teach my students, especially when you are writing personal essays and memoir. Because I think there's a more interesting story underneath what you think the story is.
Yeah, and you have to excavate that. Well, we have a lot of students in our audience, and maybe some aspiring writers who have books in them. And so I want to ask about the writing process for you, which is well documented, is a long process, right? Queen of the Night took you 15 years. Edinburgh was, a long process of even discovering what kind of book it was going to be. So how do you sustain yourself in a process that can last that long? And what's the value of staying committed to something that can, with no guarantee of a reward at the end?
Yeah, I think writing a novel is a lot like coming down with an illness, and then writing it is the cure. You're sort of, it just kind of stays with you in some way that I think keeps you moving forward. The need to finish these thoughts, to kind of push through to what's underneath. I think something that I'm experimenting with this narrator, for example, is what I call the obtuse narrator, where like he kind of knows that he's a big mess and a big troublemaker, but he's also like, everything is fine, everything is going to work out. I'm not obsessed with this guy. Nothing is wrong with like flirting with him. And of course, none of that is true. And like, and that's part of the fun of writing him, is that, he's so sure of himself, even when he's lying to himself, even when he's up to trouble. So I think it's a way of, characters like that are an interesting way to get at the ways that other people lie to themselves, which is part of what he feels sure that he is coming into an understanding of it, which I think he is coming into an understanding of. You know. But he imagines that he's a kind of sexual philosopher. You know, he's inspired by someone I met who has in fact become a self-styled sexual philosopher, porn star, like all around sort of troublemaker on the internet. I'm not going to say who it is.
We don't go and Google.
I have interviewed him as research for this book, and now he's very invested in it, which I think is hilarious. So, but I don't know if he's going to recognize himself. That's the thing. Like, so we'll see.
It's funny that you say that. I remember an author being asked about like writing about people you know, and she said that she had written this character based on this man she had met that she hated, and she thought she had nailed him in the description, and you know, if he ever read it, he would absolutely recognize himself. And she did a reading, and that man ended up being in the audience, and he came up to her afterwards and said, "Oh, that character was so hilarious." Like, he had no idea she was writing about him. So I think, you know, people don't recognize the worst in themselves if it's showing up, you know, and sometimes they don't recognize the best either.
Or they think they're another character altogether who they're not, or, you know.
Yeah.
But I think getting to the part about how do you sustain yourself, actually, I did think of something that did help me, has helped me in general, which is to get your self-esteem from other things besides writing. So, like, I used to joke, like, I'm good at lifting heavy objects, for example, which is still kind of true. I'm not as strong as I used to be. I do like helping people. I have to watch out for that because that can get me into trouble, but like helping too much. Something like yoga, for example, also, like being proud of having done a particular posture or position well, like even that can kind of like get you through a difficult part of the day when the writing isn't going well, you know, or if you're like, I did my push-ups, or I did my steps, or like what all these other little things that often seem inconsequential are actually like kind of holding you up, you know. I remember during COVID, I had this little garden on my windowsill that was all kitchen scraps. I was growing like scallions and bok choy and all these things from cuttings. And every day it was such a pleasure to come down and just see something living in the middle of winter on my windowsill. So like these kinds of things are, you know, or for example, I'm also well known for writing about roses at this point in my career. And I think a rose garden is a fantastic way of like learning patience, learning to commit to something that's bigger than the moment, learning to just keep at something. You know, all these things are, I would say, like being a rose gardener helped me become a novelist. You know?
It teaches you patience and how to care for something and to have that delayed gratification because you have to put in work before you see a result. So yeah, I could see that.
And to be patient with your major mistakes.
Yeah. On the surface, your three books seem wildly different, right? One's nonfiction, one is a deeply personal story of this man's journey, and then one is an epic, operatic story. But reading them, I couldn't help but feel that there was a lot of overlap in themes, the music, masks, love before love. Is that a conscious decision to carry these themes through, or do you think it's because of who you are and it just comes out in the writing?
I think it just comes out in the writing. I have to be careful that it doesn't become a shtick, My husband, with the new book, he was like, no curses.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, fine.
Love a curse. Yeah.
I do love a curse. But I understood what he meant. Like I had to stay away from that too familiar territory. There is a mask. There's something that he does where he grows a mustache and a goatee for a job interview, And then when he gets the job, he's like, okay, now I can never shave. And then he feels like he's this guy like in a disguise, and that is something that I did go through, when I was on the job market. And as I got older, I just decided that I liked it, but I still like to joke about it. And so there is like a mask on his face, as it were, as he's going around the campus.
Can't escape who you are and what you care about, and yeah, it comes through.
I think, the thing that I noticed when I first grew it is something that I did put in there, which is people started to take me much more seriously, and I was like, so first of all, this is terrible because I didn't realize that you didn't take me seriously before. And second of all, like, stop it. And then third of all, oh my God, I kind of like it that you're taking me more serious. Like, it was all these kind of complicated reactions that I was having as it was all going on. And now, as I get older, what makes me laugh is that it's almost as if it's going away because it's turning silver, turning white. So that part is also interesting. It no longer has the same character, as it were. But that we don't stay with that character that long enough for that to be in the novel. Yeah.
Has there ever been any talk of making your books into films? And have you ever thought about who you would cast in the films?
So the best thing that never happened to me is that Almodovar was briefly interested in adapting my first novel, Edinburgh, but then decided that it was too close to his film Bad Education, which it is, and I was devastated, but I was also thrilled because I was like, he knows who I am. It's been optioned again by a production company, and I haven't had any kind of news. Obviously, Hudson Williams would be at the top of my list for starring in Edinburgh as the main character Fee. I don't know who I would. I mean, Neil Patrick Harris would be great as the choir director. I don't know about the others yet. I think they would be possibly harder to say. With the Queen of the Night has had more consistent interest, but never anything coming together. There was Sarah Rule was interested at one point in doing the adaptation, and that would have been an amazing thing if she had done it, but that did not come together. And another actress as well, I won't say her name, but that was a moment where I was incredibly excited about. Sarah I know, so I feel like I can say that Sarah was interested, and she would be like, yeah, I was. So I guess I'm still waiting. I think that, with The Queen of the Night, it would be a very expensive production. I think that's what in everyone's minds because of the costumes. And the success of Bridgerton has shown that kind of a costume drama still has a lot of appeal to audiences, and I do think, it's written in 5 acts. Each act could be a season, so.
Yeah, that would be my hope, because a film would have to cut so much. So a TV show, a prestige series, Netflix. So if you're listening, Netflix, let's make that happen.
Right. I don't know who would be the actress though for The Queen of the Night. That one is harder for me. I could imagine she became very famous with the girl with the dragon tattoo. That actress could be a fantastic choice for The Queen of the Night. Yeah.
And I know, it's kind of a dream for writers to have their work adapted because it gets a big audience, but it's also got to be, it's not yours anymore. It becomes somebody else's art and somebody else's vision, and you have to give up control of it in a lot of ways. So I could see that being sort of a double-edged sword of having that.
My real fantasy now is that Park Chan-wook, the Korean director, would do Edinburgh. That would make up for Almodovar passing over it.
All right, universe heard you, so.
Yes,
yeah.
so with Hudson Williams, of course, as the star. So we'll see.
I think I'll ask one more question,
Okay.
and then we'll
Sure.
let the audience. And I'd like to read just a couple of lines from your essay, 1989, that really resonated with me. And this is an essay that talks about your time in San Francisco and activism. This is the peak of the AIDS crisis and not much being done about that. And you and your partner there get beaten, especially your partner gets badly beaten by the police. And it ends, I stand there, my hand on the ambulance, and a television news crew arrives and asks me to describe what I've seen. As I tell the story, I keep my hand on the ambulance the entire time. After they leave, I think about how, up to now, I have thought that I lived in a different country from this. But this is the country I live in, I tell myself, feeling the metal against my fingers. This is the country I live in. And it really haunted me because I feel like that's an experience I have, and maybe everyone has, every few years when there's a new disaster, and it feels like it's the very first time something like this is happening. And it feels like we as people, maybe as a survival mechanism, have a short memory for trauma, and we kind of move past it. So how can writing become a kind of memory without becoming scolding or didactic or preachy, but help us remember these traumatic times?
Yeah, I think, so for context, this was like written about a police riot that I had seen and been caught inside of. And I was helping this friend of mine who had been hit by a couple of billy clubs, and he was bleeding from his head. And so I was getting him to the ambulance. The ambulance crew said, keep your hand on the ambulance or they will arrest you. And so that's why I was standing there holding the ambulance. Even though I was only standing there. I wasn't doing anything at that point in the protest. And this protest it became a fairly famous one in the Castro because it happened on a night when all these people were at the movies, they were at dinner, they were not a part of the protest, but many people were caught up in the police action and were very angry about being caught up in it and angry about what had happened as a result. And I think back to some students of mine who were activists who said that they felt one of the most important opportunities of our current age was the ability of activists to pass information down to younger activists, to pass those histories along, what had happened to them, how they had struggled, and what they could learn from it. And so that's a lot of what I was trying to put into some of those essays that are in that collection. It's what did we struggle with and why? What were the tactics used against us? What were the tactics we used, and so forth. I think protest is it's one of our protected rights under the Constitution. And I think the sort of the thing that I guess I'm trying to think about all the time when I'm writing about these issues is how do I get someone who doesn't feel the way I do to possibly experience something that might change how they think of it, that gives them a moment where they experience themselves differently in relationship to the topic, and possibly in the process are changed. And I know that this can happen, through writing. I know, for example, I received a friend of mine was a part of a prisoner exchange program and sent me a letter that had been sent to him by a prisoner who had read my novel, who was in prison for my first novel. He was in prison for pedophilia. And he described in the letter, like, not speaking for several days while he was reading it, and people being worried about him, and how it was the only thing that had shown him, he said to the person who sent him the book, that what he did was wrong. Which was just an incredible result, like, if only one person ever read that novel, like, and it was him, then great, but that was an incredibly powerful experience for me in my writing career, because then I thought, okay, like, all this struggle is for something, and so I think that's why you just try to stay close to the story you're telling, and you know that you can't control how people experience it past the writing part itself, and then you just hope for the best, and you try not to think what's going to happen, because I don't think at this point I can say that I do.
Yeah, you wrote about that in one of your essays, and it was so powerful to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so you just tell your story, you put your voice out there, and see how people respond to it. And
it doesn't sound like enough.
Yeah.
It never does.
Yeah.
And yet, we know that it matters, because that's why we're all here. The other night I was incredibly cold. My husband was traveling. I was alone in the house. I live in Vermont. And I pulled out this blanket that I bought with, like, my first short story check. Wow. Which is this big black wool blanket. The hem is, like, a little rough and falling apart, but it's very warm. And I thought, like, I've had this since, like, 1994. It's been keeping me warm that long from one story.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful, and that's a very nice, tangible way, to manifest what's going on. So I have actually several other questions, but I think we're going to turn it over if there's questions from the audience, and I think you can take my microphone. And I know Nico has questions for you. No, I don't.
Two.
Oh. All right, well, while they're getting their courage up, I will ask one last one. I know the last one was the last one, but this is the last one. You've also talked about and written about the importance of joy and writing about joy, and on your Substack, which if you don't follow, he's a really great Substack, you've shared an article that was talking about anti-dystopian, that so much of writing today, especially science fiction, is imagining a darker future instead of a better future, and that we need to write joyfully, and we need to imagine, otherwise we become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so there's a long way of asking, what is the last thing you read that brought you joy?
So the example that I think of, it was a student story who she had written these stories for my speculative fiction class last winter or last fall, and the first story that she wrote was incredibly dark and dystopian story where I was like, oh, wow, okay, Wow. And she's like this incredibly hardworking, very serious, but also very funny young woman from Korea. She's an international student. And has this kind of like peppy cheerleader energy also. Is always like, Professor Chi, like, you know, she's so happy to see me on campus. And then she wrote this story that was like so lovely and unexpected after that first very dark story, which was about 3 people on a spaceship who are each taking care of a cat that is stowed away.
I'm into it, yeah.
And they each think that they are the only one taking care of the cat.
Okay. I love it.
And it's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's not played up in necessarily a comic way.
Yeah.
But it was also like this very beautiful way of seeing like the lives of the different people who work on the ship, and like and also the life of this cat, and the life, all these different things like came through. And I was just so impressed with this very different, you know, I often I'll say to them, like, stories are not not about the day that everything stayed the same. But this kind of was, and she pulled it off. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah. Sometimes
Stories are about that day.
Yeah. I say it's the Tim Gunn principle. Make it work. If it works, it works. So, yeah.
I don't think that's not like the last thing that gave me joy, but I think it's the best example I can think of.
All right, good. We have a question from the audience. Yeah, Calissa?
Or earlier, you said that
Right. I can see how that might seem like a mixed message, but I think what I mean is like on a daily basis, right? Like that day's writing may not go well. You may not reach the end of the day's work and think, victory. You know, you might be like, no. And so that's when it helps to like go to a yoga class and suddenly you like do a great headstand, you know, or something. And you're like, okay, at least I did that. You know, like there's something, the ego always wants a treat, right? It always wants a piece of candy. So, but I think that's also the danger of literary social media, which I have definitely fallen into. Like you post something and you're like waiting for the likes to come rolling in, and it's like, oh, it's terrible. Yeah, that's the loneliest thing. No one should do that. He said, as he prepared to do it again.
Hi, thank you so much. In your book of essays, you talk about responding to your students in 2018 and, you know, write for the living, write for the dead, write for when they come to you. I'm wondering, with your students now, given the context of everything, do they keep asking for that message? Has your message changed? What are their thoughts from the student's perspective on that aspect?
Yeah, you know, I was interviewed by some students for a podcast that we're doing. It was a little tricky because so this year I have been the chair of this new creative writing center on our campus at Dartmouth called the Dartmouth Literary Arts Bridge. And so they were interviewing me as a professor, but also as the chair. And it's the Literary Arts Bridge's own podcast, so many ethical complications that I tried to get them to understand as we put the questions together. But there was something that was unexpectedly poignant where they said, do you think literature changes people's minds? And I thought, oh, I think only young people think it doesn't. You know? Because I think it's like, you know, having lived long enough, you know, written long enough, I definitely can see the value of what I do. I can definitely see that I have changed people's minds. I have, like, you know, it's part of it's part of the process, part of the conversation that you're having with your readers, that they're having with other readers, the sort of, the thing that that's so it's so hard to track in the tenure process, right? Where they'll ask you like, has this candidate done work that has been an influence in his field or in their field, and so how do you know that? How do you make someone see that? But I also think of like what I think is the very unfair way that there are these East German folks who believe that Christa Wolf, the East German writer, should have published one of these novellas of hers earlier because they felt that it would have helped bring down the regime. And I was like, that is a lot to put on a novella. That is an insane fantasy of like what, especially like retroactively. Like, well, if you had only done this a couple of years earlier, the wall might have fallen. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. But maybe they're right. That's the thing. Maybe they're right.
Yes, I think we have time for one more. And this is one of our wonderful students.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about your novel, The Queen of the Night. I am an opera lover myself, and I was wondering if this book was inspired by Mozart's famous Magic Flute, which features the legendary soprano, the Queen of the Night.
Yes. It did. I remember I had the idea of writing a novel based on the magic, or like a reinterpretation of the Magic Flute. And then I got the libretto and I thought, oh, this is a terrible idea. like genuinely a terrible idea. And so I put it aside, and then I started writing the book anyway. And then many years later, I was like, oh, I've actually kind of done that. So, I can definitely like trace out the different characters in the novel who represent the different parts of the Magic Flute if you wanted that information. I think of the libretto that I read. Basically, it was like, there's this young man who he sets off to, go on this journey, and he is surprised by this snake that causes him to fall unconscious, and then these three witches appear, and they're like, "Oh, he's so beautiful, he's so beautiful," and then they're like, "Oh, our queen will want him," and then the queen is like, "Yes, this will be the young man who saves my daughter." It just becomes like this thing where he seems to have no volition at all. He like disappoints the queen. In the end, it doesn't become a hero, betrays the women involved, and I was like, I can't do this. And then I was like, this isn't a heroic story at all. And then I thought, oh, but this is like every story in life. Oh, a story about a disappointing man? Well. So, yeah. The disappointing man, of course, is the composer character. The main character is not the Queen of the Night, but the woman on the cover of the hardcover is, the historical figure, the Comtesse de Castiglione, who was the Napoleon III's sort of most famous lover. I remember going to a museum dedicated to the Empress Eugenie, and finding in a little alcove like a bust of the Comtesse, and then also this other famous lover of Napoleon III's, and I thought, how rude. And yet it was also like rude to the Empress. But at the same time, like there is something funny about it that the Comtesse imagined that she should have been the Empress. And here she is, like not even a footnote really in the Empress's museum. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that question. And thank you for joining us tonight. And Alexander Chi will be signing books at a table just outside this door after we part here. But let's give him a big round of applause. Thank him.
So much.